we are sitting here with Harsh from GaiaGrid, and I wanted to ask him some questions. I've been here for 10 days, tomorrow 10 days, and for the people to understand what this place is about, I wanted to do a quick interview with Harsh. So thank you for being here. And so my first question is, what is the GaiaGrid, the place we're sitting right now?
Well, the place we are sitting on right now is a 1-acre piece of land that I purchased 7 years ago. And the intention was to serve the land and convert it from a more or less barren landscape into a thriving food forest. It's a very small piece of land, and the intention is, can we make it into a model that can become self-sustainable in terms of food, water, shelter, and electricity as much as possible? And when I say self-sustainable, obviously the question is, are you self-sustainable in terms of how you produce your electricity? Do you produce your own solar panels or your windmills? The answer is no. But the intention was to see if I, who used to work in corporate, could quit everything and just with the help of fundraisers from friends, family, and strangers, create this sort of a sanctuary in the middle of nowhere. And so that was the initial goal. However, it has evolved over time.
So are you right now, have you reached the point where you can live sustainable just from the land?
So right now, as you've seen in your stay here, the water is completely off the grid. So there's no water coming from the government. It's all rainwater that's harvested, and then it goes into the ground, and then it's pumped into the tanks using solar panels. The shelters that have been made are mostly all made with local materials. The roofing tiles are secondhand from other buildings. The steel used in the roof is upcycled. The bricks are locally sourced. The plastering is locally sourced with mud. There are obviously a few unsustainable, if you will, materials that were used, but the hope is that over time I'll become more and more reliant on local natural materials for construction. So structure, shelter. And then electricity, obviously there's solar panels that's providing electricity through the round the clock, and it's essentially enough to run a few appliances, the lights, charging devices, and also running the pump that pumps water into the tank. So electricity, shelter, and water is pretty much off the grid. The food aspect of it, which is the more difficult aspect of it, so it's up and coming, I would say. And as you've seen, there's a lot of fruit trees on the land. Some of them are fruiting already, and some hopefully in the next few years will start fruiting. And what I've already established is when there's a season of abundance, when most fruit trees are fruiting, I've established barter with the local village friends. And so they would take some moringa in exchange for some ragi, which is a millet. Or they would take some mangoes in exchange for some other fruit. And it's not the most ideal scenario, but I think it could get to something way more sustainable in the coming years as the friendships develop deeper and as the land starts producing more food.
And of course, the villages, you exchange the goods. They are also growing it by themselves.
Yes. They grow pretty much everything that we consume by themselves. And for example, right now you're here, and only a few things are coming from the village friends. Most of the things are coming from the shops, which again aggregate things from around the village. And as we get closer to monsoon and things start becoming more abundant, then there's much more to exchange among each other.
Okay. And so for the people who are watching this right now, to understand where we are, can you maybe describe the location of GaiaGrid?
Sure. So where it is it's 90 minutes from Coimbatore. Coimbatore is an international airport and is a big industrial town in Tamil Nadu. However, GaiaGrid is in Kerala. So you take a bus essentially, 90 minutes away from, 90 minutes drive from Coimbatore, cross over the border into Kerala, and it's in a small tribal village called Kadambara, where around 1,000 people live. And in this village, GaiaGrid is a little off center, maybe a kilometer off center, in the middle of these majestic hills that are on the rain shadow area of the Western Ghats. So yeah, that's where we are.
All right. So yeah, for me it was really like interesting to come here because it's really like a peaceful place, not much noise going on, just like the animals and everything around that is natural.
Yeah.
And you can see from like this point, you can see different villages, which I also liked.
Yeah.
So it was really peaceful to stay here for me. And so you've built some different kind of places on this land.
Yeah.
Maybe you can describe some of those, maybe this one we're sitting in right now or outside.
Sure.
And everything you built here.
Sure. So this, I could start with the structure I built first, and then with chronology, I can increase that. So the first structure that was built was the place down there, which is the kitchen and the hangout space where you charge devices and everything. And that space was built after 6 months of me coming to the land. In the first 6 months, as I told you, I used to live in a tent.
Yeah.
And so spent a few months, monsoon months in a tent. And then after a while, I finally caved in and made a small 100 square foot room, which acted as a tool shed, which is the white structure, right? And so that was the tool shed. And when monsoon got really severe, I used to also sleep there inside the tool shed. And obviously, I didn't have the resources to make anything bigger because it was all fundraised, and the funds were coming in slow because people didn't really know me, and there was, probably apprehension on who this guy is and why he wants money for growing things. So after 6 months of that, I built the extension to the shed, which is now the kitchen, the hangout space, the charging space, and all of that. And that space was made entirely with materials received locally and purchased locally. Then the second structure that was made was a temporary toilet, which is now the tool shed.
That was the second one.
That was the second structure, yes. That
okay, that's the tool shed, right?
Yes. Okay. So that used to be 4 bamboo poles and a blue colored tarp, a plastic tarp,
okay.
and then a hole in the ground with a bucket and a toilet seat. And so we did that for 3 years, 3 or 4 years. Then this structure was built. This is the dormitory where you sleep. This is also a yoga space, also a meditation space, and also a space which is energetically very charged, as you would have seen.
Yeah.
And so this is a very special spot for me and for all the volunteers that come here. Then after that, only 2 years ago, the toilets that you're using were made. So now there's a compost toilet and a flush toilet, and the flush toilet's refuse goes back into a septic tank, which can then be reused onto the land after composting for a few years. And then the water tank was built maybe 3 years ago. So, and 3 years ago or 4 years ago, I had the capability to pump water finally. So then the need for a storage came up.
So that's also a nice place to get a dip inside the pool. It has like many purposes.
Yes.
All right. So also one question is, what does GaiaGrid mean?
Yeah.
So maybe you can explain that.
So
the name.
When I was thinking of the name for this space, GaiaGrid came up almost spontaneously. I was thinking of names, and I was born and raised in India. And I have nothing to do with Gaia, essentially, which is a Greek goddess. And she's a goddess of, she's essentially Mother Nature. However, I had read the Gaia hypothesis by James Lovelock, and where he expounds a lot on what Gaia is, the idea of Gaia, the idea of inanimate and animate objects coexisting in harmony. And I really liked that description of Gaia, that you don't have to shun things. You can embrace everything and the interplay of animate, inanimate, of what we consider bad and good is what embodies Gaia. And so it was a great name. And then grid, the word grid came up because a friend jokingly said that, Harsh, you're trying to make an off-grid farm, but no matter how off-grid you go, you can never go out of Gaia's grid.
Yeah.
So I was like, GaiaGrid, that could be a nice name. So spontaneously it came up, right? However, 3 years after coming to the land, a local lady from Coimbatore, she reached out to me and said, Harsh, have you realized that your land is full of quartz crystals? And I was like, yeah, I've noticed. And she said, also, have you realized that on 4 sides of your land, there are 4 villages, and all 4 villages have temples, and the temples are dedicated to Mother Goddess, essentially. Amman, they call it. And if you did a crisscross of the 4 temples, in the center is GaiaGrid. And so then the name made sense to me.
But that was not intentional.
That was not at all
intentional. It was just coincidence.
Yeah, but again, you know how the tagline on Instagram says, this is not a coincidence, the universe brought here. And I really believe that everyone, including me, that has set foot on this land, it is by uncoincidence. And it is kind of, it unfolds over time. And I was telling this to Amelia, that many people who have left have written to me after months, maybe years, saying, oh, I now realize why I was there. And some connection happens, some sort of synchronicity happens. So it's always like that.
Yeah. So obviously I'm also here, and people watching this, maybe one of those people will get inspired by this, and maybe if they want to contact you, or if they want to come here, how can they do this?
Well, I mean, the GaiaGrid.org is the website, and there's a contact form there. They could reach through that. Instagram is also there. It's just GaiaGrid, GaiaGrid. I'm most responsive on Instagram. There's also email. I mean, the website has everything on it.
All right, perfect. So what was the inspiration for this place you've built?
I think my curiosity was the inspiration, to be honest. I really just wanted to see if I was capable of doing something like this. And when I say something like this, I wanted to see if I was capable of living on a land by myself with very little input from outside and thrive. And initially it was about survival. So initially it was, can I survive? And obviously, as you can imagine, it required a lot of courage. But back then, it didn't seem courageous. It just seemed matter of fact. It just felt like, oh, I have to do this. So I think what made me do it was something else, something bigger than me. And I just got out of my own way. I just let it happen. And so, however, when it was happening, more details started to emerge. I realized that, okay, the space perhaps could be a lot more than just about planting trees and planting vegetables and making sustainable architecture. It could be more in the sense that it could host people who can live as transformed humans with no specific agenda. So as you know, that when people come in, you've also read in the message, it's never with the promise that you leave a healed human or a transformed human, but it's the conversations, it's just the way we live, the discipline. And I think that helps people in some ways. Not everyone, obviously. Some people hate the place.
Really?
I mean, some people feel like, it's not that overwhelming or not that majestic or whatever. I feel like the overwhelming majority of people leave recharged into their jobs, into their businesses, or into their careers. And I think that has come up to be an unintended consequence of this space, which I didn't plan. And so I think now it's slowly evolving into that. But I mean, the motivation was honestly just to see if I was capable of doing this.
Yeah, beautiful. So you started here 7 years ago, right?
This is the 8th year. Yes.
8th year. Yeah. And you told me the story, but I liked it so much, so I asked the question again.
Sure.
Did you ever think about quitting this
I did.
journey?
Yes, I did. So this was within the first 6 months of starting the place. Um, as I said, I used to live in a tent, and my partner, who I had started with, she had just left, and there were no plans for her to come back. So I was now staring at a blank slate, barren land, with two tents on the ground, an electric fence, constant fear of elephants, monsoon rains.
Mm.
And the two tents, one of them was a storage tent, which had some of my clothes, some of my books, some certificates from university. And the other one had my essentials. So, I don't know, my toothbrush, my phone, my laptop, which I was using for fundraising, and some other electronic devices. So a USB powered light for the nights, power bank, these kind of things. And so I had those, and it was monsoon time. And I remember thinking that, wow, the fundraiser is really slow. It's not picking up, right? And as monsoon kept happening and became stronger and stronger and stronger, and back then there were no trees on the land, so the wind would come and hit the tent directly. And I obviously had never experienced Kerala monsoon before, especially on a hilltop, which faces southwest. So it's like, it essentially attracts all the wind, right? So I remember this was a slow and steady progress of sadness, of my partner having left, of no essentially clear sign of where the project was headed. And there was this few days already where I hadn't eaten a proper meal because most of the food that I was cooking was with firewood, and because of the rains, all the firewood was damp, which in turn meant I was eating raw salads. And so that was a while. And so every day I would take my laptop, my power bank, my phone, go to the village, charge everything, and come back and do the fundraiser. So one night I'm sleeping in the tent, and I wake up suddenly feeling completely wet, and I realize that the floor of my tent is wet, and so and one of the papers in the tent was floating like this. So there was like already like a few centimeters of water. And now, so I go to reach for my phone, and my phone doesn't work anymore because it's wet. And so at this point, I'm like, okay, I can't think of devices right now. I just go to the other tent. So I opened the tent. It was raining. I went to the other tent, and I realized that the other tent that I hadn't opened in a while, it had mold in it. It was full of mold. So I again came back to the wet tent, took my sleeping bag, and I essentially was like, I don't really know what to do now. I cannot ask for help because I can't walk out now because it's full of elephants nearby.
Wow.
And it was dark, and my phone didn't work, so I just sat there and cried. And after a while of crying, I told myself, okay, maybe you have lost this, and maybe it was a mistake that you quit your well-paying job and fancy apartment. And so obviously these questions come up, right? And so I said, okay, there's no shame in asking for help. You're already doing a fundraiser. If this doesn't work out, leave tomorrow, go away for as long as needed, go seek help from a friend or a family member, and then come back whenever you're ready for it. And so with that resolution, I was also tired enough. I fell asleep. And when I woke up in the morning, it was completely quiet. And I opened the tent, and the sun was out, and there was a rainbow outside. And in that moment, I feel like I knew that quitting was never going to happen. And yeah, so that was one moment the night before, when I really was like very close to leaving. And I'm glad I didn't.
A lot of people would have left at that point. Like I can't imagine a night where you just sleep in like a pit of water.
Yeah, with the sleeping bag under.
Yeah.
The sleeping bag under. And yeah, I mean, there was not much sleep, but I think when you're super tired, You just sleep. The body falls asleep.
Wow.
Yeah, and obviously that's the spot that you chose to make the fire pit.
Yes.
So it's like a full circle and cleansing happening,
7 years later.
Yeah, 7 years later, yeah.
So yeah, the days, the 9 or 10 days I've been here, I came here and was thinking, like, does Harsh have a fire pit around this area?
Yeah.
And then I came here and asked you, and you said, actually, no, we don't have a fire pit.
Yeah.
And so we started to build this fire pit that we are.
There's a dog there. I don't know whose dog it is. Yeah. Yeah, there was a little puppy.
Okay.
Sorry, I got distracted.
No problem. What I was saying is the 10 days I've been here, we built this fireplace.
Mainly you.
I mean, it was like a project we did together.
For sure,
so,
yes.
Yeah, and I will show all of these places while we're talking.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my work that I did here. Also some watering, some cleaning the leaves from the land.
Yeah.
So
installing the
pull-up bar. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the work I did.
Yeah.
Maybe you can also give more input on what work volunteers did all over this time, or maybe will do when new volunteers
Well,
come.
in the past 7 years, a bulk of the work happened in the first few years, as you can imagine, where the shaping of the land was necessary, because the intention was to try and stop all the water on the land, and so everything was hand dug. So we did a lot of trenches. We did a lot of small pits, around 1,100 pits. We did some big pits that collect all the rainwater. And so that was the initial bulk of the work. Then after that, a lot of the work was collecting organic material like twigs and leaves and mulch, and put it in those pits to encourage termite growth, because the termites then eat it up and convert it into soil. And we did a few rounds of those. And after that, we filled those pits with legumes that fix nitrogen into the ground. Once that was done, we came and chopped it. And once you chop nitrogen-fixing plants, the roots that actually hold the nitrogen get released into the soil. So you amend the soil's quality. Because as you would have seen walking around the land, the paths, they're extremely rocky. Even when you're digging, you would have realized. And so how do you then make that soil livable for plants and so they can thrive on them? So a lot of that work happened in the first few years. Then once the pits were ready, we planted trees in them. And so that was one part of the job, right? And then we had to keep producing compost for these trees. And we produce compost every day in the toilet. So then one person's job for those months was just management of that. Is it being composted properly? And then transferring that to those pits. So this was initial. Then we did a lot of soil building. So collecting mulch, collecting organic material, collecting termite soil, collecting cow poop from the streets, and it's free manure, and then mixing it up and allowing microbes to grow on it. And then so a lot of the raised beds that you would have seen, they have really good soil. None of it was imported from outside. None of it was purchased from anywhere. It was all created here. And so a lot of the work happened in the initial years, and it continues to happen, obviously. Then planting trees, then creating guilds around the plants, then raised beds, then help with construction, then help with some painting, some artwork, like around the windows you would have seen. So that was the initial work, and now it's mostly maintenance work. So weeding, watering, aesthetics of the space, cooking, cleaning, general maintenance of tools, as you could imagine any semi-established farm to be. And it's obviously not really a farm. It's intended to be kind of this food forest meets farm kind of a setup, where you have mostly fruit trees with raised beds here and there, because the intention isn't to grow everything here, everything on site. The intention is to grow everything that would grow here, space permitting, and then whatever is left, as in whatever remains from our consumption can then be exchanged with local people for whatever we need. And so I feel like it may have been a bit too ambitious to imagine the space would be completely self-sustainable in terms of food. But, with 1 acre of land, I feel like, this is where we are headed.
Yeah. Wow, okay. So maybe just to name some, what kind of fruits or like foods do you grow on this land?
Sure. Well, so there's moringa, neem, mango. Then there's a lot of native fruit trees, hardwood trees. So there's teak, rosewood, mahogany, casuarina. Casuarina is mainly around the fence. It grows really fast. It's used for construction. And if it is ever harvested, it will be to replace the wood on the land.
Those are the really tall ones?
Those are the really tall ones. They look like pines. They are in the pine family. And they were mainly planted as wind barriers.
Okay.
So they grow fast, they create a wind barrier, and then you can plant other trees next to them, so they grow straight instead of growing bent. So then there's support species like pigeon peas and glycidias, and I also use moringas as support species and also for food. Then there's a lot of fruit trees. So there's guava, there's lychee, there's papaya. Then there's berries like avocados. that we have just discovered that avocados are berries. And so there's pretty much every tropical fruit tree that you can imagine, minus the rambutan, mangosteen, durian, none of those. Mostly native fruit trees. There's bananas, there's jamun, which is Java plum, there's tamarind, there's lots of flowering trees to attract pollinators. Yeah. Wow. There's quite a lot of trees. A total of 700 trees on the land. Yeah.
Really diverse also.
Yeah, I hope they are diverse. I mean, obviously, I'm constantly looking for new trees that are native. When I go on walks into the forest and I discover a new tree, I usually ask local people what the tree does. Is it invasive? What is its purpose? And then someone says, oh, this tree is really old and we don't see them much here. So I try to get some seeds and plant them on the land. So this land can become as biodiverse as possible.
Okay.
Yeah.
So another question that's on my mind right now is, if you could think of one moment, which was the most magical moment you had while living here, is there coming something to your mind?
Well, the one is the rainbow from the tent, for sure.
Yeah. I can imagine that was...
I think one of the most magical moments I've had on the land was during COVID, during the lockdown.
Okay.
And I was not hosting people. And I think I really find magic in the mundane. I feel like nothing special has to happen for magic to be found, right?
Yeah.
And I think during COVID, what happened is for 6 months, I had not hosted people. And what happens when you live in solitude for that long is your brain just observes things longer and deeper.
Yeah.
And so I remember I just woke up one day, and it was not a magical moment, but the whole day was like that. I woke up and I felt intoxicated. I felt like I was high on something. And I walked around the land, and everything, every little sapling, every tree, the clouds, the insects on the ground, they were so like 3D. When I look at them, it was almost like they were interacting back with me. And the whole day was like that. The whole day walking around. If I see any bird, I'd be like, oh, I wish that bird just landed. Oh, it did. It landed on the branch, and we are now staring at each other. And so that dialogue with Gaia became really amplified on that one day. And I feel like I've had fleeting moments of those, but I feel like this was one of the most magical things where Gaia really opened up to me. It's like staring into someone's eyes. And so it's like Gaia was staring at me, but in a very benevolent, kind way.
Wow.
So yeah, I think that was.
And that's what was like the longest period you've been alone?
6 months.
6 months?
Yeah.
Okay.
6 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you've been here for 7 years,
Yes.
8 year
Yeah.
now going. What is your vision with this place, or where do you want to see it in 5, 10 years maybe? Or do you even have a vision?
I have multiple ideas. One of them involves giving away the land to someone and going off into the forest, so I can
Wow.
really practice my non-attachment.
Okay.
Because I feel like this is what happens, you grow something with all your love and care, and suddenly you go from being a steward of the land to an owner of the land. And then or anything, or a person, or an idea, or an object. And I feel like stewardship is how I want to approach all things in life. And so if you're a steward of something, you should be able to up and leave without worrying about the fruits of your actions. So that would be a noble thing to do. Am I strong enough to do that? I don't know.
Yeah.
So that's one idea. The other idea would be to have a family and live here and convert this into a sanctuary where people can continue coming. What Gaia is right now, but with a family. The other is to use this model and make it bigger, like fundraise for a bigger piece of land where more people can stay permanently, and then not really make it like a commune, because everyone would have their own thing that they like doing. But the shared vision would be to have friends nearby that we can work on something greater.
Yeah.
So that's one. However, I think what I'm more inclined to do is allow the space and life to again work through me to see where it goes.
Yeah.
Because I may have 5 different plans, but Gaia has evolved in a way I would have never planned. And so I think I'm just going to let that happen.
Yeah.
And I think that is much more how I live life, like just be in acceptance of what comes.
Yeah. Beautiful. I think you will take that way.
Let's hope so.
All right. So, if people want to do something like you do,
if
they want to start like their own farm in a sustainable way, what advice would you give them?
Become really good friends with yourself. If you can enjoy solitude, and if you can be at peace within yourself, then go for it. Obviously, you can do it with friends, family, etc., etc. But if you want to do it just by yourself, make sure you're friends with yourself first. But the practical aspect would vary person to person. So you have to have resources, you have to have the money, you have to be able to fundraise, you have to be able to know the land codes requirements, you have to understand soil and how to build soil, you have to understand sun zones and wind zones and rain zones.
Did you know all that?
No, none of these. Yeah. But I was curious.
Yeah.
And so obviously you learned these over time. Yeah. I did have a fair idea of what work I wanted to do or needed to do, because before this I had for 3 years already worked in similar setups in like off-grid farms. In Haiti, I told you I worked. When I was in Mexico, I had a little bit of chance to work. So, but predominantly I would say my experiences in India and Haiti kind of prepared me for this. And so if people wanted to start something like this, I think follow the GaiaGrid page, because I think you would get an idea from the very beginning on how it has evolved.
Yeah.
And then I also host volunteers, intentional volunteers, longer term, for those who really want to come and understand everything, how everything here works. I also host interns from universities. And soon I'm going to do a course on how to quit your job and start a farm.
Oh.
But maybe that can be cut out actually from this one.
All right.
For privacy.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All
I mean,
right.
I don't know if this answer is good enough. But
yeah, I'll take that answer.
Yeah.
So if you want to come to this place, or if you want to contact Harsh, I will link everything.
Yes.
The Instagram and the website, email maybe also.
Yeah.
I will
if
link
they want to
it
donate, you can add the PayPal of GaiaGrid.
Yes, I will add everything into the description, so feel free to go there.
Yeah, and you can even mention maybe that there's no business on the land. So whatever people pay for food contribution goes just for the food. And then whatever I fundraise from outside, from volunteers, from them doing fun charity events or whatever, that pays for the project and then the long-term planning. So yeah, I don't know if you want to mention it, but you can.
But I mean, you already like speak it out, so I think
Yes.
I will just cut that in.
Okay, perfect.
So yeah, this whole like the whole funds and everything that goes into this place also gets used or for this place. So
Only for this place.
It's not. It has nothing to do with the business or anything.
Yeah.
It's just to build this farm and build new buildings.
Yeah.
And to give also lots of volunteers and people the chance to see this place.
Absolutely, yes.
So, yeah, before I come to the last question, what is one message that you would like the world to know or the people watching?
That's a difficult one. One message that I would want people watching to know. I would say the one message that has worked for me, I don't know if it'll work for everyone, but it's to live feelingly. And I feel that often what happens is we either live per a dogma, so a belief, or we live according to, the school of science. So there's these compartments that we use, and I think it serves people. Obviously, that's why they choose their compartment. However, I have realized that for this kind of life, especially, feeling your compass will never lead you off your course. And I feel like at the end of the day, what makes you human is how you feel towards the planet and how you feel towards the people around you. And if you're using that as your marker, then you'll constantly keep experiencing things that add life to you and that add life to people around you. And so I would say, yeah, live feelingly. And if I had to increase or add to it, I would say live feelingly in the moment. Because so much of our conversation when we meet people is about the past, of how amazing the past was, or let's plan for the future. And so, yeah, live feelingly in the moment.
Beautiful. Yeah. So the last question.
Yeah.
What is if you would choose your favorite plant or tree on this farm?
My favorite plant or tree?
Or do you even have one?
It would be very difficult for me to choose a favorite plant, obviously, because I've planted most of them by hand.
They're all your babies.
And they're all listening to me.
So they're all, you don't want to give.
Exactly. So you're all my favorite. But if I had to choose one.
It's like choosing your favorite child.
Yeah. Well, I mean, no parent admits, but they all have a favorite child,
Yeah.
I would say one of my favorite plants, apart from the others, is an avocado, which is on the backside of the land.
Yeah.
Because A, I planted it, and B, it hasn't fruited yet, and it'll take another 2 years to fruit. But the patience and the work it required to grow from a small 6-inch sapling to a big tree now, I feel like now I feel invincible. I feel like I can grow anything. And so I feel like that tree is a constant reminder, among other trees, yes, among other trees. That tree is a constant reminder that, and avocados here on the land have been extremely temperamental. Like many of the avocados died in the beginning, like 3 or 4 of them, which is not a lot if you look at how many trees survived, but still. And so that tree is a reminder that actually this land is thriving and it has good soil and it has the capacity to really grow. Yeah. So yeah, I think that tree.
Yeah, and I think lots of people know how difficult it is to grow avocado from the seed.
From a seedling,
Yeah.
So yeah, and I'll show you the tree. Maybe if you want, you can put it in the video. It's become really big now, and hopefully it'll start fruiting soon.
All right. Yeah. Okay, then Harsh, thank you a lot for this conversation and for sharing this with the people watching.
It's been really, truly, I mean, not because you're shooting this, obviously, but it's been really so nice having you here. And I was telling this to a friend that, sometimes I host volunteers who treat this place as their home, and they own the space, but not like I own it, but like care for it. And I'm so grateful that you were here for 10 days. Hopefully our paths will cross again, maybe for longer. But yeah, I'm really grateful.
It was not a long time, but I'm very grateful to have this experience, to meet you, and to experience this land. Really beautiful.
It's been really good.
Yes,
thank you. I know I've met a brother now.
Yes, thank you.
Good.
Me
Thanks,
too.
Shukru.
Alright, thank you.
Sitze on the floor, bin bewusst, baue mir ein imaginäres Vor, bin verschluckt, schweife ab, Memories rücken vor, greife zum Phone, setze die Zeitmaschine über die Ohren, bin zwar home, aber auch irgendwie verloren, damn.